Welcome to this Innovation Unpacked deep dive. Look, if you are building anything in the tech space right now, whether you're at a seed stage startup, scaling a creative agency, or frankly just trying to figure out where artificial intelligence actually intersects with market reality, you need to sit down, grab a notepad, and really listen to this one. Because today we are unpacking what I can only really describe as a spectacular slow motion collision.
A collision between the infinite utopian promise of AI software and the brutal, absolutely unavoidable physics of unit economics.
That is exactly the friction point. We've got our hands on a fascinating dossier today. It's essentially a manifesto. It's titled The Icon Business Model Teardown, and it was authored by Mike Boysen. And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to dunk on a struggling startup. It's really to deconstruct exactly why the phrase infinite scale is so often a mirage in the AI era.
Right, it's a buzzword that, at least in this specific case, masked a fundamentally broken business model. Boysen's dossier is surgical about this. It doesn't just offer high-level critique, it performs a complete forensic autopsy on Icon's entire operational pipeline.
Yeah.
It maps out the exact coordinates of where the math stops working. It shows us what happens when you try to apply the economic rules of traditional software to the heavy physical reality of generative AI.
So why should you, sitting and listening to this right now, care about some specific company's unit economics? Because this dossier is an absolute masterclass in product strategy. It highlights the dangers of misdiagnosing your own value proposition. It reveals the exact moment when making a process 10 times faster actually bankrupted the company doing it. So let's start with the baseline.
The empirical bedrock reality.
Exactly, as the dossier calls it. Set the stage for us. What did the market actually look like when Icon decided to enter the chat?
Well, to understand why Icon's failure was so structural, we first have to really understand the market reality they were attempting to disrupt. Boysen gives us a very precise empirical anchor. If we look at the 2025-2026 window, the average market rate for a single human-produced, user-generated content video at a UGC ad was exactly $198.
$198, which is a very specific number.
Yeah.
But it's not arbitrary, right? That is the exact price-to-value ratio the market organically settled on for an authentic, high-converting piece of content.
Precisely. That $198 represents a market equilibrium. And beneath that price tag, there was a hard financial baseline for human labor. The dossier points out that the floor for a mid-level U.S. freelance performance video editor, so someone who actually knows how to pace an ad for TikTok or Instagram, is about $35 an hour.
Okay, so that's a variable cost.
It is a purely variable cost. If a brand wants 10 ads, they pay for the corresponding human hours. If they want 100 ads, they pay for 100 times the hours. The economics are perfectly balanced. The cost scales linearly with the output.
Right, perfectly balanced. But from the perspective of a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, that linear scaling is a massive target. They look at that and see inefficiency.
They see human bottlenecks.
So enter Icon. Their original value proposition was this impossible, almost magical promise. They walk into the room and say, hey, forget the $198 per ad, forget the $35 an hour freelancer. We are going to give you a flat fee SaaS subscription. And yes, we are talking a true SaaS model here for just $39 a month. And for that $39, you get infinite AI-generated video ads.
And that word right there,
yeah.
Infinite, that is the exact moment the trap snaps shut.
Wait, play devil's advocate for a second. I am trying to see the vision here. Why is infinite a trap? Software scales infinitely all the time. If I build a project management app, adding the 10,000th user costs me fractions of a cent. Code is endlessly replicable at zero marginal cost. Why is an AI video generator any different?
Because AI video generation is not just software. It is bound by what the dossier brilliantly identifies as the compute floor. You have to look at the denominator of the equation. You have to look at the physical reality of how a video is made, high-performance cloud GPU rendering, and the dossier specifically mentions environments like AWS Deadline Cloud or custom pipelines, incurs linear, non-negotiable compute costs for every single second of rendered output.
Okay, break that down for the listener, because I think people hear cloud computing and they just think of invisible magic floating in the sky. What is actually happening on the server side?
When you ask ChatGPT to write a poem, the computational weight of generating that text is incredibly light. It's fractions of a penny in energy. But rendering a high-fidelity video, manipulating millions of pixels across dozens of frames per second, applying lighting, physics, audio synchronization, and visual effects, That requires vast amounts of energy and time from top-tier graphic processing units, or GPUs.
Which are actual physical machines.
Exactly. These are physical pieces of hardware sitting in massive data centers, drawing massive amounts of electricity, requiring massive amounts of cooling. And companies like Amazon Web Services meter that usage by the second.
So if I understand the math here, you have a fixed, low-tier revenue stream, $39 a month, from the user colliding violently with a variable, highly aggressive compute cost on the back end.
Yes, it is a mathematical impossibility.
Yeah.
Software scales infinitely, but computational energy and time do not.
It's like selling an all-you-can-eat steak buffet for $1 and just sort of praying that your customers only eat a side salad.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, isn't the whole point of venture capital to subsidize that cost? I mean, Uber lost money on every single ride for a decade to build a network moat. Why couldn't Icon just eat the server costs, bleed VC cash for a few years, and wait for compute to get cheaper?
Because of the behavioral economics of their specific user base. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating concepts in the entire manifesto, the Jevons paradox.
Oh man, this concept is mind-blowing. Okay, for anyone who hasn't encountered the Jevons paradox in the economics class, it's this highly counterintuitive rule. It states that when a resource gets cheaper and more efficient to use, people don't use the same amount of it and just pocket the savings. They actually use exponentially more of it.
Right.
The classic example is highways. If you add a lane to a highway to reduce traffic, the increased efficiency just encourages more people to drive, and within a year you have a bigger traffic jam than you started with. Induced demand.
Induced demand, precisely. And if we apply this to the specific ecosystem of Icon, we have to look closely at their core user, what Boysen calls the job executor. In this context, the user isn't a casual consumer making home movies, it is the performance marketer.
Right, and we really need to understand the psychology of the performance marketer. Their entire job is a volume game. They manage huge budgets, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and they are constantly battling ad fatigue. They're desperately testing new creatives, new hooks, new text overlays against the Meta or TikTok algorithms just to see what converts.
Exactly. They're highly rational actors trying to maximize return on ad spend. So when Icon launched and made the marginal cost of generating an ad functionally zero for this user, what did the marketer do? They didn't just generate their usual 5 ads a week, look at the $39 monthly bill, and think, wow, I saved so much money this week.
No, they click generate 500 times a day.
They absolutely did, because why wouldn't they? If it costs nothing extra to test 1,000 micro variations of a hook to find the one that performs 2% better, a rational performance marketer will generate 1,000 variations.
I mean, you have to admire the rational user behavior there. If I have a tool that gives me infinite variations for a flat fee, and my job depends on finding the winning ad, of course I'm going to spam that generate button. I'm going to run that server hot. It is a brilliant arbitrage for the user.
It is brilliant for the user, but it actively, structurally bankrupted Icon. This is the fatal flaw the dossier exposes. Icon bore the entire linear cost of the cloud rendering. By dropping the friction of creation to zero, they unleashed a tidal wave of induced compute demand onto their own servers. The user's perfectly rational optimization behavior searching for that one winning variant crushed the system's most expensive computational bottleneck.
Wow.
Making the process 10 times faster just burned through their server budget 10 times faster.
So it wasn't a marketing failure. It wasn't that people didn't want the product. The system failed because of physics. They built a business model that actively punished them for high engagement. Every time a user logged in and loved the product, Icon lost money.
Yes. They inadvertently incentivized their own financial ruin. But the compute bleed is only half the story here. The dossier moves into what it calls the 99% complete trap, which explores how the product itself, despite running the servers red hot, actually began to alienate the very users it was built for.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We've established the servers are melting down because of induced demand. But what is the user actually getting for all that compute power? Because if the output is pristine, if the ads are printing money for the brands, maybe you can justify the burn rate and raise more capital.
I don't think so.
Right. Icon was out there pitching this massive efficiency win. They said, we will give you an ad that is 99% complete in under 5 minutes. On paper, to a stressed-out marketer, that sounds like a miracle.
It sounds like a miracle right up until you experience the AI uncanny valley.
The weird AI hands, we've all seen them. The fingers that just sort of merge into each other.
The weird hands, a stiff, robotic vocal inflection, an unnatural gaze, an awkward pacing transition right before the call to action. What the dossier points out is that in the world of high-conversion paid media, that missing 1% isn't just a minor annoyance that a viewer will forgive. It renders the entire asset completely, fundamentally unusable.
Let's elevate this for a second. Why is that? Why does a 1% flaw matter so much? Because if I read an article with a typo, I still understand the article. Why is video different?
Because of the psychology of ad blindness and parasocial trust. When a consumer is scrolling through a platform like TikTok or Instagram at 60 miles an hour, their brain is constantly filtering out spam. To get them to stop, watch, and ultimately click a Buy Now button, you have to establish immediate subconscious trust. If an AI avatar's eye twitches unnaturally for a microsecond, or the lighting on a product doesn't match the background shadows, the human brain instantly flags it as counterfeit.
The evolutionary alarm bells go off.
Precisely. You cannot spend $10,000 pushing an ad on social media if the spokesperson feels subtly predatory or synthetic. It destroys the conversion rate.
So the ad is marketed as 99% done, but because of that uncanny valley effect, it's functionally worthless until a human steps in to fix it.
Exactly. And this is where the dossier introduces the lattice decision matrix breakdown. Because the AI cannot get it over the finish line, the user is forced into a manual quality assurance loop, a QA loop. They have to patch these bizarre AI hallucinations themselves. And worse, they are forced to do it inside Icon's proprietary web editor, which the dossier refers to as AdCut.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this. They took the user out of their native professional tools like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut tools they have spent years mastering and forced them to use a clunky proprietary web browser editor to fix mistakes the AI made.
Yes. And the cognitive load of doing that is staggering. Think of it like real estate. If you hire a professional to build a house from scratch, they pour the foundation, frame the walls, and you know it's solid. That's the $35 an hour human editor working in their native Premiere Pro environment. They have complete control. But Icon's pipeline is like buying a prefabricated house that was built by a robot in 5 minutes. It looks like a house from the outside, but when you walk in, the foundation is cracked, the plumbing is routed through the chimney, and the doors open upside down.
And now you, the homeowner, have to go in with a toolkit and fix it.
Exactly. The mental energy required to troubleshoot and reverse engineer someone else's, or in this case, something's of bizarre, unpredictable mistakes, actually takes more time and creates more frustration than just building it correctly from the start.
There is a brilliant, almost cruel statistic in the dossier about this, the ID10T score.
Right, the fragility index.
Yeah. For the uninitiated, this is an old IT tech support joke. If you spell out ID10T, it spells IDAOT. But Boysen uses it here as a serious metric to measure pipeline fragility. They score traditional human editing at a robust 25 out of 100 on the fragility index. It's highly predictable. You write a brief, you hand it to a human, the human does the work, you get a video. But Icon's AI pipeline, it scores an 85 out of 100 on the fragility index.
Because it breaks on the edge cases. It is highly fragile. And what's fascinating here is the key insight the dossier extracts from this discrepancy. Icon optimized the absolute easiest part of the process, drafting a basic layout, pulling stock footage, writing a generic script. That is easy. But by automating the easy part poorly, they exponentially increased the hardest part of the process, correcting uncanny, unpredictable defects in a proprietary system.
They didn't eliminate the work, they just shifted the waste. They moved the bottleneck from the creative ideation phase directly into manual defect correction, which means the user is now doing the hardest, most frustrating work imaginable while paying a subscription for the privilege.
Which leads us directly into the structural collapse of the business. Because when your product forces users into a highly frustrating QA loop, your SaaS unit economics are going to implode rapidly. In the SaaS business model, everything relies on the delicate balance between customer acquisition cost CAC and lifetime value LTV.
Right. And let's dive into CAC for a second, because acquiring a B2B performance marketer as a software customer is not cheap. This isn't like running a TikTok ad for a $20 t-shirt. Performance marketers are a highly skeptical, ad-blind demographic. You are running expensive LinkedIn ads, retargeting campaigns, maybe even deploying a sales team to get them to sign up.
Exactly. The dossier estimates that to survive on a $39 a month subscription model, given their high acquisition costs, Icon needed users to retain their subscriptions for at least 6 to 12 months just to break even on the marketing spend it took to get them in the door.
But if I'm spending more time fixing weird AI hands than I would have spent just hiring a freelancer, I'm not sticking around for 6 months. I'm hitting the cancel button.
They churned after month 1. As soon as they experienced the immense friction of that 99% trap and realized they were acting as unpaid QA testers for a buggy web editor, they abandoned the platform. High CAC combined with a 1-month LTV of $39 is a death sentence for any SaaS company.
And here's the smoking gun. This is where the dossier reads like a true crime novel. It highlights this quiet, almost desperate pivot Icon made behind the scenes. They suddenly introduced a managed service tier for $1,000 to $3,000 a month.
Which raises an incredibly important question for anyone analyzing a tech company. Why would a self-serve automated software company suddenly offer to do the manual work for you?
Because they had to. It was a structural confession. They were publicly admitting, without ever saying it out loud in a press release, that their AI couldn't actually finish the job. The entire infinite AI generation premise was dead. To stop the churn, they accidentally reverted to being a traditional, human-led creative agency.
And if we look at the financial implications of that pivot, it triggers a massive valuation crush. Venture capital funds love software because of that zero marginal cost we discussed earlier. They will value a highly scalable SaaS company at 10x to 20x their annual revenue. But an agency is heavily bound by human capital. It trades at 1x to 2x revenue.
Because every time you sign a new $3,000 a month client, you have to hire another human to actually edit the videos. There is no exponential scale. Icon was trying to hide a low-margin, human-powered agency behind a shiny, highly valued AI brand narrative.
And the human toll of maintaining that facade was brutal. The dossier points to a viral job listing from Icon for founding engineers.
Oh, this part genuinely disturbed me. I read this and had to take a walk. Listen to the language here. They were actively demanding mandatory 7-day work weeks, and the listing literally stated that these engineers would be, and I quote, badgered and harassed without respite.
It's shocking. It reads like a parody of toxic Silicon Valley hustle culture. But as the dossier frames it, this isn't just a toxic HR problem. It is the ultimate, undeniable proof of an unscalable technical architecture.
Wait, unpack that connection for me. How is a toxic, abusive job listing proof of bad code?
Think about the workflow. If your AI can cleanly automate the video generation, your engineers are spending their time building new features, optimizing the backend, and scaling the infrastructure. But if you have promised enterprise clients a $3,000 a month managed service deliverable, and your automated system keeps failing on that final 1%, crashing on the render, generating unusable audio, hallucinating visual artifacts, who has to step in and fix it so the client doesn't churn?
Oh man, the engineers.
That's exactly. The highest paid, most talented people in the building. The engineers were acting as overglorified tech support. They were using brute force manual labor to patch rendering leaks, fix pipeline crashes, and manually fulfill those agency deliverables just to keep the lights on and the revenue flowing. They were being badgered and harassed because the system fundamentally didn't work, and the management layer was using human burnout to pave over the technical potholes.
Wow. So they were physically burning out their top-tier engineering talent just to mask the fact that the AI was failing to deliver. That is a terminal vulnerability. It's technical debt paid in human exhaustion.
It really is.
Okay, so we've deeply established that the product was failing mechanically and economically. But let's look at the psychology of the buyer. Because beyond the tech failing, the dossier argues that Icon fundamentally misunderstood why brands were even buying their product in the first place.
They did. Icon built a highly complex hammer and went wandering around the market looking for a nail. They looked at the landscape of video creation and made an initial fatal assumption that marketers are frustrated because their workflow is fragmented. They have to use Canva for graphics, CapCut for quick edits, Frame.io for client approvals, maybe a script writing tool. So Icon decided to build a monolithic 14-in-1 tool to consolidate the entire software stack into one dashboard.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a very logical idea. Everyone hates context switching. Everyone hates paying for 14 different monthly subscriptions. Consolidate the stack, save the user money. It sounds like a pitch that would easily raise a seed round.
It sounds good, but it's what the dossier calls a state one hunch, masquerading as a strategy. Let's use Socratic deconstruction here to test that assumption. Look at the real-world numbers. The dossier sets up the $50 versus $50,000 problem. If you are a brand or a performance agency spending, say, $100,000 a month on media spend, literally wiring Facebook or Google $100,000 every 30 days to run your ads, do you really truly care about saving $150 a month by consolidating your software subscriptions?
No, of course not. That $150 is a literal rounding error on the balance sheet.
Precisely. Icon was aggressively, obsessively optimizing a $50 problem while completely ignoring the user's $50,000 problem.
Let me use an analogy here. It's like they built the ultimate Swiss Army knife. It has a tiny saw, a tiny magnifying glass, a tiny corkscrew, a tiny pair of scissors. It's an absolute marvel of consolidation. But if my actual job is to chop down a giant redwood tree before winter comes, I don't want a Swiss Army knife. I want a chainsaw.
That is exactly right. The true job to be done, the JTBD for a growth marketer, isn't, I need to make videos efficiently.
It's return on ad spend, ROAS. The marketer's true existential struggle is finding a winning creative angle, a psychological hook that stops the scroll before their daily testing budget runs out and their boss fires them.
Exactly. And providing a marketer with 50 mediocre, slightly uncanny AI-generated videos doesn't solve their ROAS problem. It actually makes it exponentially worse. It creates a massive new data processing bottleneck. If the creative lacks a compelling, human-verified psychological hook, running infinite variations of it just means you are going to burn through your $100,000 ad budget infinitely faster. You are just scaling mediocrity.
They built a brilliant, complex solution for the exact wrong problem. And to make matters worse, as the churn inevitably skyrocketed because the product didn't deliver ROAS, Icon started to panic. And the dossier details how they began deploying what it calls hostile dark patterns.
The trust deficit.
Right. We've all experienced this. Hiding the cancellation mechanisms deep in the settings menu, forcing users to click through 5 screens of guilt trip pop-ups, shady post-trial billing where you can't easily remove your credit card.
In B2B SaaS, deploying dark patterns to trap users is a fatal error. The dossier references Doblin's 10 types of innovation here, specifically pointing to the service and brand layers as critical for defensibility. When you weaponize your user interface to trap a frustrated marketer in a $39 a month contract, you completely destroy your experience mode.
And performance marketers talk to each other. They're in Slack channels, Discord servers, subreddits. You burn one of them with a shady billing practice, the word of mouth turns radically negative overnight, and suddenly your customer acquisition cost, which was already too high, skyrockets even further because nobody trusts your brand anymore.
It is an unrecoverable trust deficit. So let's take stock of where we are. The original $39 flat fee SaaS dream is officially dead, killed by compute costs and induced demand. The managed agency pivot is a high-stress, unscalable nightmare burning out the engineering team, and the brand reputation is severely damaged by dark patterns. The business is standing at the edge of a cliff.
Which brings us to the most valuable part of this entire analysis, the 3-pathway real options synthesis, the triage phase. I love this part of the dossier because Boysen doesn't just tear the company down and walk away, he actually maps out the way out. 3 distinct strategic pivots to save the underlying technology before the runway runs out. Let's walk through these because this is where the real lessons for founders are. Pathway A, persona expansion.
The logic here is straightforward. If the core problem is that brands don't want to spend hours fixing weird AI hands in a clunky web browser, the solution is to stop selling to the brands entirely. You pivot the target persona to the people who do know how to edit video and who do want to work faster, the $35 an hour freelance editors.
So you stop trying to replace the human worker and you start augmenting them.
Exactly. You package Icon's back-end generation infrastructure and sell it to creative agencies and freelancers as a workflow superpower. The human editor uses the AI to draft the rough cut, but then the human handles all the subjective client feedback, the pacing, the emotional resonance, smoothing out the uncanny valley artifacts in their native software.
Which isolates Icon from the churn.
Yes. This pivot completely isolates Icon from the brand-level churn. The freelancer is happy because they can bill for more projects in less time, and crucially, Icon's compute burn drops drastically.
Wait, why does the compute burn drop? Just because the freelancer isn't using it as much?
Because an expert editor knows exactly what they want. They only pull the specific AI assets they need for a scene. They aren't wildly clicking generate 500 times hoping to get lucky like the performance marketer was. The induced demand vanishes.
I see. The trade-off is a much smaller total addressable market. There are fewer professional editors than there are general marketers, but you gain massive retention and fix the unit economics.
I like it. Okay, but what if they don't want to pivot their audience? Pathway B, sustaining the core. What if Icon stubbornly refuses to let go of the direct-to-brand SaaS model?
Then they have to drastically, painfully shrink the product surface area. They have to kill the 14-in-1 tool narrative. In fact, they have to kill the full video generation feature entirely.
Wow. Just rip the main engine right out of the car.
They have to To stop the compute bleed, they must pivot into being a strict AI asset manager. The dossier calls it a Lego block asset tagging system. You implement strict rendering token limits, no more infinite anything. You stop trying to do the impossible task of finishing the final 1% of the video. Instead, you just supply the marketers with perfectly organized, pre-tagged, AI-generated B-roll clips and automated script frameworks. It becomes a highly sticky digital asset management tool, a DAM. So you go from saying, we will make the whole ad for you, to saying, we will organize your media library so perfectly that your human team can make ads twice as fast. It's definitely less sexy to investors, but it actually has positive, sustainable unit economics.
Right. It's a survival move. But there is a third option.
Yes. Pathway C, the disruptive inversion, the ultimate pivot. When I read this section of the dossier, it fundamentally changed how I think about AI business models. Break down this network inversion for us because it is genius.
This is where Boysen leverages Doblin's network innovation type. The thesis is radical. Abandon generative AI entirely. Stop rendering pixels.
Let me just repeat that so you, the listener, grasp it. An AI video generation company that completely stops generating video.
Hear me out. You still use the proprietary AI models, but you retrain them for analysis, not generation. You use the AI to ingest and tag massive amounts of raw brand footage analyzing competitor hooks, demographic appeal, visual elements, pacing structures. But instead of the AI attempting to edit the video and falling into the uncanny valley, Icon becomes an API, a routing system.
A routing system.
It matches that deeply analyzed raw footage with a decentralized network of vetted human freelance creators.
Okay, let me visualize this. The brand uploads a folder of raw iPhone footage of their product. The AI instantly analyzes it, realizes it's perfect for a Gen Z TikTok demographic, writes a brief, and then automatically pings a specific human expert in the network who has a proven track record of editing high-converting Gen Z TikTok ads.
Exactly. It's a highly intelligent, AI-powered matchmaking system. Icon takes a 20% platform cut on the transaction for facilitating the match and providing the AI analysis. And here is the absolute genius part of this inversion.
Yeah.
Where does the actual video rendering happen?
On the human creator's laptop.
Yes. The human creator renders the final video locally on their own machine using Premiere or CapCut.
That is incredible. Let's talk about CapEx versus OpEx here, because this is the magic trick. Capital expenditure CapEx is when a company buys massive, expensive physical assets, like Icon paying AWS for massive server farms to render video. Operational expenditure OpEx is a flexible day-to-day cost. By doing this network inversion, Icon shifts the entire CapEx burden of cloud GPU rendering off their own balance sheet and turns it into a decentralized OpEx network.
Exactly. It's the Uber model applied correctly.
Yeah.
Uber doesn't buy a million cars. They leverage the cars their drivers already own. Icon stops renting millions of dollars of cloud GPUs and leverages the perfectly good GPUs sitting inside the MacBooks of 10,000 freelance editors. Icon's massive linear cloud compute costs instantly drop to absolute zero.
It's brilliant. You solve the compute physics, you solve the uncanny valley because a human is doing the final edit, and you solve the ROAS problem because human taste is back in the loop. But of course, a pivot this massive requires intense validation. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the Execution Toolkit. The dossier doesn't just pitch Pathway C and walk away. It actually stress tests it using a 3-tier PRFAQ methodology.
It's a highly rigorous way to ensure the unit economics actually align before you ask your engineering team to write a single line of code. You write the press release and the frequently asked questions before you build the product. Let's look at the first tier, the customer FAQ. The obvious, immediate question a brand will ask is, if you are an AI tech company, why on earth is a human editing my video?
And the answer is all about perfect positioning. AI does the 90% heavy lifting, the data analysis, the scripting, the organizing, the tagging of terabytes of footage, so that the human editor is completely unburdened and can spend 100% of their energy perfecting the final 10% that actually drives their ROAS.
And because the AI is prepping all the project files instantly, the turnaround time for the client drops massively. The dossier projects the delivery time going from a traditional human agency's 72-hour turnaround down to just 12 hours.
Yeah.
Plus, they introduce a transparent, fixed marketplace rate of $150 per video.
Which is a 24% discount from that $198 empirical market average we talked about at the very beginning of the show. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it completely removes that terrifying $3,000 a month managed service retainer that was causing so much churn. Okay, but what about the internal risks? Tier 2 is the internal business viability FAQ.
The primary internal risk for Pathway C, and this is critical for any marketplace model, is supply-side liquidity.
Getting the editors to actually join and stay on the platform?
Right. If you were building a two-sided marketplace, you need top-tier talent. You can't just have amateurs. And veteran freelance editors will only stay on the platform if the AI tagging engine actually makes their job significantly easier. The dossier insists that the AI analysis must hit a 99% accuracy rate. If it hands an editor a messy, poorly tagged project file with the wrong timestamps, the editors will reject the jobs. They will say, this takes longer to decipher than doing it myself. If the supply side rejects the jobs, the network collapses.
It all hinges on the AI actually being a good assistant to the human. But if they pull it off, if they balance the marketplace, we hit tier 3, the private equity FAQ, the endgame, exit optionality.
This is where the valuation gets truly exciting. If Icon achieves a liquid, two-sided marketplace powered by an AI routing engine, they stop being just another easily commoditized SaaS tool that can be cloned by a competitor over a weekend. They become a structural monopoly. They become the underlying indispensable infrastructure for the entire performance media gig economy.
And that completely changes who wants to buy them. The dossier points out that the acquisition target shifts dramatically. As a failed SaaS tool, maybe they were hoping to be swallowed up by Adobe for pennies on the dollar as a minor feature rollup?
No. As a liquid network, they become a prime target for Meta or Google.
Yeah.
Because those massive algorithmic ad networks are desperate to natively integrate human-in-the-loop, high-conversion creative generation directly into their own ads managers. If Meta can offer brands a button that instantly connects their raw footage to a top-tier human creator, that is worth billions.
What an incredible journey. Let's synthesize this whole thing because we've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by examining a company failing at first principles, trying to beat the immutable linear physics of cloud GPU compute with a flat fee subscription model. We saw how they drove their own engineers to exhaustion, trying to hide the flaws, and how they alienated their core users by trapping them in the 99% done uncanny valley.
And we ended with an elegant, highly disruptive network inversion. It is a powerful, necessary reminder that in the business of technology, you cannot ignore the physical reality of how your product is delivered, the compute costs, the energy, the servers, and you absolutely must understand what your user is actually trying to achieve, which is return on ad spend and psychological resonance, not just playing around with 14 different tools in a web browser.
Exactly. Look, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought from all of this, something to really mull over as you look at the landscape of AI tools flooding the market right now.
We've seen how the most successful, scalable application of generative AI in this entire scenario wasn't to replace human creativity. The AI failed when it tried to be the artist. It succeeded when it was positioned as a hyper-efficient, decentralized routing system, an API that perfectly matched raw data to human talent.
So what does that mean for the broader future of all white-collar automation? We are all constantly reading headlines terrifying us that AI is coming for the worker, that the editors, the writers, the coders will be replaced. But what if it doesn't replace the worker at all? What if AI, when applied correctly, just replaces the management layer that analyzes the data and assigns the work?
A fascinating question. Are we automating the creator, or are we automating the middleman?
Something to think deeply about next time you log into a SaaS platform.
That is a wrap for this deep dive. Thanks for exploring the unit economics of AI with us, and we will catch you next time.